The Hail Varsity Radio Saturday Morning Show, presented by the Nebraska Lottery. Strap yourselves in. Here are your hosts, Chris Schmidt.
Y'all don't even know he was a virgin until he's 28, and now, roll tide.
And Mark Cranack.
Time has come for someone to put his foot down. And that foot is me.
Welcome to it. Weekend editions here. It's Hail Varsity Radio, presented by the Nebraska Lottery. Hug yourself, pinch yourself. You have made it. It is football Saturday, and we are just excited to bring you Hail Varsity Weekend. We're down here in the Railyard in the Hail Varsity Hurrdat offices. Chris Schmidt, Mark Cranack, Elijah Herbal, that bearded cameraman. We love Gorman's filming. Hello, Gorman. Man, it's a good day to smile. It's Nebraska football, Ohio State, and we are ready to get you into things all Big Ten. Can join us this morning on Hail Varsity Radio Weekend, 466-3776, 466-3776, 800-825-5865. Find us on Twitter, Chris Schmidt, that is me, at Schmidt_radio. Give me a follow. Mark Cranack at Mark Skurs is where you follow Mark. And, of course, Elijah Herbal at Herbal Essence. Elijah back at our ESPN Lincoln studios. We're down here in the Railyard again in the Hail Varsity Hurrdat offices. You are invited to come on down and safely enjoy Nebraska, Ohio State here in the Railyard. It is awesome. So many good folks and restaurants and just businesses down here that would love to see you. So the invite is always open and always welcome. And if you're thinking about a spot to watch Nebraska, Ohio State, you are sure as heck welcome down here in the Railyard. Busy first hour. We will rewind with Ohio State insider Tim May. And Tim's been covering Ohio State since 1984. Tim's a wild man, and I mean that respectfully. He is a party to listen to. He will run down all your thoughts on Nebraska, Ohio State. In hour two, we are going to run down Brandon Vogel from HailVarsity.com and magazine. Vogues is in Columbus. I do not know if he went with the pizza in his hotel room last night or if he ventured out into Buckeye land. So Brandon Vogel going to be with us. And then the Iron Horse, Gary Sharp. It's a special day for me because it's just yet another year to cover Nebraska football, to do what I love, and that's talk Nebraska football. A man who's helped shape my life with Nebraska football is cousin Dino, Dean Schmidt. He's got an RV. It's not a Heisenberg RV, thankfully. But the point is there's not a game he's missed over the last several years. Dino is going to be joining us with the Cousin Dino prediction at 8:50 before we get you into the rest of your college football day. We welcome in Mark Cranack. Cranack, you brought your kids, you brought your puppy. Brother, it's good. You're getting them all kicked off right here for 2020.
I brought the whole crew, and now I'm realizing I probably should have got up at 3 in order to just get it all together.
Yeah.
You know, it's been hectic. And I got off on the wrong exit on the way here, too.
You're fine. You have your Nebraska stocking hat. You've got your Hail Varsity sweatshirt that looks incredible.
Well, go on.
We've got Tucker, the new puppy.
Tucker is
and that's Tucker with a T.
It is. Tucker the mother. He's great. He's great. We think the vet thinks that he is part Shar-Pei, part lab.
Okay.
Doesn't even really know. He's got a few wrinkles, but he's sturdy.
We all have a few wrinkles, Cranack. It's okay. So we are going to dive into it. Excited? Hey, Tucker. Good to see you, big boy.
And he is. Hold on a second.
Are we? Tucker has tied us up. Okay, so Tucker is trying to execute a 3rd down and 8 zone blitz. There we go, Tucker. He's busting through the line of scrimmage. Also
literally almost knocked us off the air.
The Griswold consumption of cord message over in the corner there. Let's hear from Scott Frost, because this is one topic and one key that I think Nebraska fans are so anxious and interested in seeing today and the rest of 2020 with year 3 of the program. Think about it. Your hopes and dreams for 2020. What are your hopes and your dreams for 2020 as a Nebraska fan? Well, let's be straight. For the longest time, we're all hoping we were going to get football. At least you get game 1 today and hopefully many beyond just today. But when it comes to Nebraska and this daunting task as a 4-touchdown underdog to Ohio State, there's been moments in Nebraska football recently and for the last X number of years that once this snowball rolls downhill, there's no way to get out of its grasp. Here's Scott Frost, no fear of failure, the mantra he brought with him from Central Florida. But this is what Frosty's looking for today, and I think it's also what a lot of Nebraska fans are looking for today, that appropriate response.
I feel good about us from that standpoint. The guys are excited about the challenge. Listen, we could complain about a lot of things. Our guys are just excited they're going to be playing. But they know the test in front of them. So I'm anxious to see their response when inevitably Ohio State makes a play or two on us, hits us in the mouth, scores on us, whatever happens. I want to see a bunch of guys that don't like that but aren't afraid of the next play and go out and continue to try to make great plays. That's all we can do, and I feel good about that, but we also have to respond the right way during the game.
That'll be so important. You got to get off to a good start. All of the normal cliches we talk about in big games, but in all honesty, Nebraska could get lit up a little bit on the defensive side of the ball. So could Ohio State. I mean, Nebraska, things feel and look good on paper with the offensive line, with Adrian Martinez, with Mills at running back. And it's been 331 days since you've seen Nebraska football tackle somebody else. It is incredible to have this opportunity. But hopes and dreams, my hope and dream is this thing's a ball game in the fourth quarter if you're a Nebraska fan. And I want to see some growth. I want to see, are you a better front seven against the run? Are you a more competent setup on the offensive line where you have options and depth, so you have a group of 5 that can be dominant and you can lean on? And I want to see Adrian Martinez play free football and go have some fun versus being worried about pressure and injury. Let me see him run the football. Let me see him be magic like he was as a freshman. And then, the intrigue about sprinkling in some of Little Mac as well with McCaffrey. So it's all on the table today. It will not get much more difficult. I mean, yes, the schedule's murder. Wisconsin looked amazing last night, but you are taking on the best of the best today. Mm-hmm. Go ahead and gauge yourself appropriately that way. Don't overreact one way or the other. And let's build and learn from this if you're Nebraska, no matter what happens.
Well, you want to see some defiance and some fight out of the team, and it's something you saw. It's something that was missing last year, specifically against Ohio State, right? I think once things got going the wrong way, it snowballed, and it snowballed quickly. But if you look at how they played them a couple years ago, and even honestly early on last year, before things got really crazy,
for the turnovers.
But that's what you want to see, and that's what Frost is talking about: is be defiant. As soon as the play is over, don't accept that as your fate for the next play and the play after that and the play after that. That's not easy to do. It sounds like kind of psychobabble BS. but when you're going against Fields and he's so damn accurate,
it's good.
And if you try to rush him from the edge, well, then you just then he can just break contain.
He's a sub 4.40 guy.
Dude, he's tough. He is tough to deal with. And that can get frustrating. And you can find yourself trying to compensate for that over time. And I think so what Frost is talking about is stay disciplined, stay within each given play. And look, it's not like Ohio State is coming in with are they coming in with superior talent? Mm-hmm. Definitely. But I wouldn't say
not experienced necessarily.
Right. They don't. This is the first time they don't have a Bosa or a Chase Young.
Kranak, there's 7 new guys on that Ohio State defense.
Look, and I'm sure those guys
they're awesome.
I know.
But how awesome are they?
Exactly. I'm talking
in
the
game
degree
one.
To which.
Yeah.
Like, do they have the first overall pick on the defensive line?
Probably. Eventually.
Maybe eventually. But he's got to build up to that. This is the first.
Yeah. He ain't Lawrence Taylor yet.
I'm just saying.
Give him till the third quarter.
Well, and I'm just saying, look, Nebraska's rolling up with a secondary that's got experience.
They're fun. They're a fun secondary that can go take the football away.
Against a wide receiver core that's obviously super talented and is receiving balls from a very good quarterback that's probably going to be a first round. I'm not trying to discount any of that.
Yeah.
But it's not like there's 2,000-yard receivers that they're trying to cover today, right? Like
they got Olave that he's got a chip on his shoulder based on how the Clemson game went last year.
Yeah.
He's really good, but yeah, I mean,
it's younger guys that are trying to prove themselves, and they're going to try. Listen, they're going to be now. I'm being overly optimistic. Nebraska's going to get rolled today.
Mark at Mark Skurs, that's your job.
Disclaimer. Disclaimer. They're going to get rolled today. But if you're
are they?
Listen, if you're a newer receiver for Ohio State, you have not been tackled to the ground very much either, right? Neither of these guys have. Okay, now you're going against a Boodle. You're going against a Cam Taylor-Britt. You're going against a Deontay, against a Dismuke. Mm-hmm. Deontay's going to light a couple people up today. I'm confident in saying that.
He's been itching for a year, that shoulder injury.
So he's going to light a couple people up today. You've seen Cam Taylor-Britt. He's capable of doing that too. So if you're one of these younger Ohio State receivers that's trying to prove yourself, this is also your first welcome to what it's like to play big-time football. These guys are talented. I think the secondary is going to get burned a couple times because that's what Ohio State does.
It's going to happen.
But I think they're also going to get lit up a couple times like they've never been lit up in their lives. And are they going to be able to deal with that for a full game? We'll see. Probably, because they do recruit the creme de la creme. But I don't go in there thinking, oh, man, Nebraska's secondary is at such a disadvantage and they're just going to get picked apart all game long with no repercussions. I think there will be repercussions. And I think Ohio State's got a bit of a learning curve too. Flip on the other side of the ball, Nebraska's offensive line, say what you want about whether or not they have a bunch of first-rounders or All-American. They sure as hell got experience. I mean, this is as, if not more, experience of an offensive line that Nebraska's had in forever.
Over 100 combined career starts.
Yeah.
You've got a couple of new spots where Farniok's at guard. They've been working him there, obviously. Yep. What type of help and what type of baptism does Ben Hart get at right tackle? Does he get some help with tight end coverage off the edge? And then can Hymas do his thing on the left side, Bo Wilson, and then some of the guys behind him? And a big day for Cam Jurgens, too, as well as he finished last season. Yeah. He's kind of the starting point for sure to get things comfortable with Adrian back there. And we'll hear from Scott Frost right now on the Adrian Martinez dynamic. Specifically, you love the nod that happened earlier this week, and that is Adrian getting that pat on the back from his peers, being announced as one of the captains. Here's Scott Frost.
Adrian's a great human being on top of being a good player. Luke McCaffrey's a great human being on top of being a really good player. So I think both those guys are seen as leaders of the team. The voting certainly kind of proved that. But at every single position, there's a competition to see who the starting guy is going to be. So quarterback was no different. I don't know how much separation there was between the two, but they both did a great job, and Adrian did a good job on and off the field.
Go play ball. Go make plays. Be smart. And I think this is key, Kranak, for today, is for each quarterback, you're supposed to come in and go win the Heisman if you're Fields. If you're Adrian, you want to kind of exercise some of last year's demons with how tough a game you had. You want to kind of rely on that success you did have as a true freshman. You really played well in Columbus, so you have that past experience of doing some nice things. Can you let the offense work for you, for both quarterbacks, but specifically, can you just kind of stay even keel and not try and force it or push it, because there's going to be some early opportunity in this game for momentum swings. And the other part of this, too, that I think could help Nebraska, and I know a lot's been made out of attendance and crowd and decibel level and the fact that it's empty. You had 110,000 spots that may hold 1,000, right? Family and friends. That is interesting to me to see. Ohio State has their own edge and their own juice, but it's a whole different thing when you come out to that home stadium. You got an 11 o'clock kick. Yeah. Are they going to be able to be trained killers out of the gate early,
right? Or
are they going to have to ease into things, because it's a very real thing in college football, having to create your own momentum, your own energy, and that's a task Ohio State's got to have, and be ready to come out of the gate, because I think Nebraska is going to be prepared. Nebraska is out-talented, but I think the psyche and mindset here of just go play and just let it all hang out absolutely works in Nebraska's favor versus the pressure side of things. There is pressure for Nebraska. You want to go play well and perform well on this stage. But, I mean, it's really Ohio State's the storyline for the Big Ten. Ohio State's the storyline for another team in the college football playoff. They'll have that each week, and you're supposed to do really bad things to Nebraska. It's one thing to know you have to do it. It's another thing to actually go out and do it.
Yeah, well, and totally. And they have – look, it's a team with championship pedigree. I mean, I think there's a lot of people that thought they should have, they got jobbed last year,
yep.
to put it lightly. And so that's a squad that's coming in with that kind of mentality. So are they able to jump on Nebraska right away? Does Nebraska surprise them with the fight that they bring, or do they lay down? Right?
I don't expect them to lay down. It's are you beaten into submission versus just checking out? And I don't anticipate Nebraska checking out today.
I think there's enough people that if you start to see that for some reason, if you start to see maybe guys hanging their heads or not giving enough effort or whatever, I think you're at the point now where you do have, you don't want to say enough depth, because it's not, I'm not saying it's championship level yet, but I think at most positions you have options. Mm-hmm. And I'm not sure you've had options this whole time that Coach Frost has been here. Mm-hmm. I think in some cases it's just like, well, if this guy plays like garbage,
he's the best we got.
And it's not, and by a mile. So, there's not much of, we really don't have much of a choice here. I do wonder about a few things here, though. Now, when you look at how Nebraska played last year against Ohio State, remember when they came out in the I formation and the place came unglued, right?
Option football, Kranek.
Well, now I don't think, in fact, I know they're not completely transitioning to old school I form, nor do I think that would necessarily be the best decision for the program. But it looked pretty damn crisp last year. Are you telling me you break it out today a little bit as a change up? I just wonder how much more of a staple it is. Like, was that truly was that intended to be a one series wrinkle for the whole year last year? I think it was intended to be more than that. I think the game got away from them, so they're like, screw it.
Well,
we're not even giving it away anymore.
I think your quarterback health really helped determine how much option ball you ended up using the rest of the year.
Yeah. Well, but right though. But don't you think that was intended to be more than a one series wrinkle for one game? And now they've had all this off season. You have a line that probably averages 320 a player. Mm-hmm. Right, and like you mentioned, 100-some starts. You have a back that's about 220, 225. Mm-hmm. You got a quarterback that's about 220, 225. You got 3 tight ends that can play, which presumably could come play that, quote, fullback position or H-back. Look, I'm not saying they're going back to Tommy triple option all the time. I
think it's in the back pocket if you want it today.
Look, and the fact that they're going with Mills – and the makeup of the offensive line, I truly think there is going to be more of an emphasis on physicality than we have seen in a while. And I think that could express itself in one of those, in some I form. If it's not I form in particular, some more downhill sets.
They're going to run the ball. We're going to run the ball and see if that works. Elijah's going to jump in here for a second on option. Elijah, you got some intel?
Well, it's just I don't think that the option is going to be a big part of the game plan today, but what I think it was big for last year is that Ohio State knew that was in the back pocket of Nebraska. They were probably preparing for that, and even if Nebraska doesn't pull it out at all, which I don't think they will because I think they're going to stick with their traditional offense and see how it works in game one. But even if they don't pull it out, Ohio State's been preparing for that, and that's less time to prepare for the traditional Nebraska offense when you also have to prepare for the option on top of that.
It's time spent. Good point. And you're burning some time on we'll talk to Tim May here shortly. The Rewind features the one of the top Ohio State insiders, the Letterman.com with Tim May. So that's been a topic this week. Will Ohio State see Nebraska option football? and it's been on some people's mind in Ohio State. We'll continue to mow through this first day of football in the Big Ten. It's Nebraska football 2020. We're excited to have you with us. Weekend edition of Hail Varsity Radio. Mark Cranack, Chris Schmidt, Elijah Herbal, and we are down here at the Hail Varsity Hurrdat offices in the Railyard. Want to see you down here in the Railyard for Nebraska, Ohio State. And just an awesome spot to watch football, socially distant, of course, and enjoy the view from the Cube. A quick timeout with the weekend edition. A rewind next with Tim May talking Huskers and Buckeyes. This is Hail Varsity. We're presented by the Nebraska Lottery.
Now back with Hail Varsity Radio, presented by the Nebraska Lottery with Chris Schmidt and Mark Cranack.
Back to it, Hail Varsity Radio, presented by the Nebraska Lottery. It's Nebraska-Ohio State Week. Season's getting kicked off. We welcome in big-time Buckeye insider Tim May with the LettermanRoad.com. Tim, it's awesome to get caught up with you again. How you feeling heading into Week 1 that's taken a while to get here?
Seems like it's taken 3 years. This 2020, Chris, has been one for the record books in terms of hurry up and wait. You're not going to play. Yes, you are going to get to play, but you're not going to get to play till October. You're not going to get to play to the third weekend of October, blah, 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 but the third weekend of October is upon us. Pretty exciting, I think, if you cover football, like we do, and then on top of that, just the anticipation of the start of a year and the unknowns that come with that. It's pretty interesting that it's still here, and I keep reminding people, as bold and beautiful as the SEC is in scheduling 10 games, for example, they haven't played all 10 games yet, so this is going to be an interesting year, just literally from day to day, but season, but definitely from week to week.
Tim May's with us here. Follow him on Twitter at Tim_May Sports. And Tim, what are you expecting Saturday to look like? Do you have any gauge? I mean, this is going to be as great as football will be. It's going to be such a weird, eerie sight.
Yeah, Ryan Day even alluded to the fact, they're going to have this ambient noise piped in at all the Big Ten games. Crowd murmurings, I think, is how the Big Ten described the pre-recorded stuff. And then when big plays or something happens, they can juice up the volume from 70 decibels to 90 decibels, and so that's interesting. But as Ryan Day pointed out, in Ohio Stadium, you get like this echo effect going, because it's, just like Memorial Stadium there in Lincoln, it's a big empty when it's empty. And so that's going to be interesting. Having only about 1,000 people in the stands, most of them parents of the players, is going to be interesting because they'll be making their own ruckus, you would think. Matter of fact, I even asked some of the Ohio State parents whether they were going to try to have a get-together with the Nebraska parents, because let's face it, those two groups, along with the Nebraska players and Ohio State players and even the coaching staffs and administrations, are probably why the key components and why the Big Ten is even playing in October from the ruckus they put up, And so see how much noise. It'll be interesting to see how much noise they can put together on a football Saturday.
Tell me a little bit of your interpretation and reaction to Nebraska and Ohio State teaming up like they did to get football. And Nebraska was loud. Ohio State carries such a huge stick, not only with Dr. Borchers, but also Gene Smith and, of course, Ryan Day. Just the, I guess, the camaraderie that will be put on hold for sure Saturday, but just this journey they've taken together.
Yeah, it is interesting. Crisis makes strange bedfellows because otherwise they're extremely competitive on the recruiting front, and any other way you can think about football goes. You've got one program that's literally at the top of the heap. Both in your own neighborhood and then across the nation. I'm talking about Ohio State. You got the other that used to be that way that's working very hard to try to get back, and so the competitiveness that comes with that. That's easy for me to say. That comes with that though is interesting to sort of put aside for a common cause. And I had Jack McEwen on my podcast this week from the Omaha World Herald, and we were talking about that. Probably the one that really kicked the tires to begin with were the Nebraska people, but the Ohio State people were right there with them. I mean, Ohio State tried to be sort of what you call a good member, of the club when it was first announced that football was being postponed till the spring, whereas, the Nebraska folks let their misgivings about it all show right from the start of that, but Ohio State jumped right back in there. Gene Smith holds a lot of sway, the athletic director of Ohio State. Dr. Christina Johnson, the new president of Ohio State, imagine her first days on the job were in midsummer, and this is what she was walking into. But she is very pro athletics and football in particular, and so she really moved. I think she made her voice heard after some tentative steps among her peers in the Big Ten, and that's why we're sitting here today. Of course, the lawsuit that was brought by the Nebraska players helped uncover some of the irrationalities, if in fact that's a term, of some of the reasons why the season was postponed to the spring in the first place, and there wasn't a lot of reasoning going on except just because. And what you found is you watched football all across the nation here in the last 7 weeks. People are playing. Some of them have had to postpone games, obviously. Some guys have had to step aside, but they are playing the game. And so far it's been pretty safe when it comes to the COVID-19 aspect of it.
Tim May's with us. LettermanRoad.com is where you find him. And get Tim on Twitter at Tim_May Sports. Tim, when you look at this Ohio State squad, the expectation is just reload. You have Fields back at quarterback, but give me kind of a rundown of what the expectation is for Ohio State on the lines of scrimmage. You guys have always had incredible skill and ball hawkers in the secondary. Nebraska's excited that Okudah's playing somewhere else, and with Chase Young. But what monsters are lurking, I guess, is the question that are supposed to be the next greats.
Well, that's what Ryan Day is trying to explain to people is this is a different team, and I have already written and talked about this on my podcast many times. Offensive line, for example, this is as deep an offensive line and capable an offensive line from that depth standpoint as I've ever covered at Ohio State. I've been covering the team since 1984 and was around it for 7 years before that. And then of course you've got the best quarterback in the country. Arguably, he's at least in the running in Justin Fields. We all saw, what he did last year. And if he hadn't hurt his knee there in that Michigan game, who knows what he would have been like in that game against Clemson when they really needed some quarterback runs they didn't get, but still almost pulled it off. But you've got this offensive line. It's in essence, you got Thayer Munford at left tackle, who probably would have been a 5-star recruit if he hadn't switched teams going into his senior year and then didn't get to play his senior year in high school. And then the other 4 starters are all 5-stars. Former 5-star prospects, not the least of whom is Wyatt Davis, an All-American at right guard last year. He left the team, but then as soon as the Big Ten decided to revisit something that they didn't want to revisit, he and move the season back to the fall. He re-upped with the Buckeyes. His grandfather, by the way, is the late Willie Davis, defensive end of repute for the Green Bay Packers way back when. And but then you got Josh Myers at center, Harry Miller, sophomore this year at left guard. At right tackle, Nicholas Petit-Frere. He seems to have won a battle for that starting job, although he was pretty much considered to be the heir apparent there. But he won a battle for that starting job with another 5-star, Paris Johnson. So in essence, you got 4 5-stars and a guy that should have been a 5-star starting on the offensive line with a bunch of backups there behind him. And then at wide receiver, the safeties coach for Ohio State, Matt Barnes, referred to the collection of receivers as electric. As the other day when we were talking to him about it, and he says it's the best collection of receivers from a depth standpoint he's ever been around. And he's the safeties coach, so he gets to see these guys on video every day if you follow my drift.
Oh, yeah.
That's the reason I asked him about it. And then at running back, you've got Master Teague the third back, and I can guarantee you Nebraska fans remember Master Teague the third from that game last year. I called him the guy they put in. It was the fatigue unit they put in to wear on defenses after J.K. Dobbins and Justin Fields had kind of softened them up. And then they've got 4 guys extremely capable, they do believe, at tight end, led by Luke Farrell and Jeremy Ruckert. Jeremy Ruckert can stretch the field, good receiver. And then Luke Farrell is a really good blocking tight end and receiver. So they feel really good on that offensive side.
Yeah, you just kind of laid out as if I could paint a thought bubble of my listeners right now. I mean, the Vegas spread is the spread. Ohio State is out to make a statement. Let's go to the defensive side real quick. I mentioned the 2 incredible draft picks that are now in the league with Okudah, who was just phenomenal last year in Lincoln. Chase Young, Scott Frost has draped praise on him, even yesterday. But tell me about Harrison and Wade. Those are 2 big-time just playmakers for you defensively at Ohio State. And then who else? Who's kind of an under the radar, if there is such thing, on the Silver Bullet squad that folks may be waiting to hear about?
Yeah, there are several guys who are under the radar because, like you just pointed out, a lot of guys left from that great defense from a year ago. And like you talk about Okudah, it's your night when you intercept the ball while you're laying on your back. So I know
it's not your night.
Yeah, I know Nebraska exactly, or vice versa. Uh-huh. But the bottom line is they're replacing some big time players. Zach Harrison was a 5-star, one of the top rated recruits in the country a year ago, and played quite a bit as the year went on. He's replacing in essence Chase Young. You got some other guys. Jonathan Cooper was a captain last year, suffered a high ankle sprain, which kept him out of all but 4 games last year. He's back now in essence his 5th year, and he's going to be the other defensive end. But you got this kid named Tyreek Smith, for example, who got banged up as the year went on last year. But if he stays on the, he's one of those guys with that great explosive first and second steps, as a defensive end, who could really turn heads on Saturday. And you got a bunch of guys behind those guys where they're really trying to replace people, quality people. Is in those defensive tackle units because, really, they're going to have, in essence, 4 new starters across that defensive front when you really look at it. And the defensive nose tackle and then 3 technique, the guys that were really good there last year, Devon Hamilton and Jayshon Cornell, of course, they're gone. They're also in the NFL. But, Tommy Togiai is a guy to keep your eye on. He played quite a bit last year. They're kind of scrambling at that other defensive tackle spot, but there are 3 or 4 guys that could play, including Haskell Garrett, a kid who was wounded when he tried to break up a domestic dispute back in the summer and got shot. The bullet went through his cheeks, and he's been recovering from that. He's a guy who may or may not play much on Saturday. But they've got other guys that are ready to step in, like a Jaden McKenzie and names like that. So keep your program handy. And then in the defensive backfield, they've got one returning starter in Shaun Wade, and really he was what you'd call the nickel cornerback. But Ohio State played 1 high safety and 3 corners almost all year last year, and he was one of those 3 corners. Of course, he returned. He left the team for a while, but returned after they got the clearance to play. He'll be at one of the cornerback spots. Probably Marcus Williamson will be replacing him in that slot corner. It looks that way right now, a guy who's been there for a while, a journeyman. And then Seven Banks, another journeyman, will be probably at the beginning at least in that other cornerback spot with possibly Cam Brown or somebody else also stepping in there.
A few more minutes, Ohio State preview with Tim May, LettermanRoad.com. More on the Buckeye secondary.
At safety, Josh Proctor, big-time recruit out of Oklahoma 3 years ago. He's been waiting his turn and learned from a really good one in Jordan Fuller last year. They think he might be ready to play, but another guy who might even start in the game at that spot is Marcus Hooker, the younger brother of Malik Hooker, who everybody remembers from Ohio State from several years ago. Great center fielder, safety. His brother's a lot like him. Josh Proctor's more of a roll up and hit you hard in the slot kind of guy at a safety spot. They're both considered rising possible playmakers, so that's what they're dealing with. But they got three linebackers back. Tuff Borland in the middle. Baron Browning, who was his backup in the middle, is now at the strong side linebacker spot, and then Pete Werner, who started the last 2 years at the strong side linebacker spot, is now the starter at weak side linebacker. And they've got a slew of journeymen, second, third year players who are champing at the bit just to get a chance to play, like the Roger Mitchell, Kayvon Pope, Dallas Gant. Those are just to name a few. Tommy Eichenberger. So they feel like they've got the depth there, but some of those guys have not played a whole lot yet.
Tim May, a couple more minutes with us. Hail Varsity Radio, previewing Ohio State, Nebraska. You can hear Tim May with his podcast, LettermanRow.com. That's on Apple and different podcast platforms. And you can read Tim, of course, with LettermanRow.com at Tim_Mays Sports is where you follow him. Tim, where can Nebraska, or how, in your eyes, can Nebraska hang around at this? It's just Tuesday, but a lot of Nebraska fans remember the effort that Nebraska had in 2018, and I know that was a different Ohio State team, and it was an Ohio State team coming off that what the hell happened in West Lafayette. Fast forward to last year, Ohio State was as good as advertised, the real deal. So how do things at least stay somewhat competitive and in a non-embarrassing fashion for Nebraska Saturday, or is that likely?
Well, even last year, when you look back on that game, some things went topsy-turvy for Nebraska, including, like I said, that interception when Jeffrey Okudah was laying on his back, a tip ball. The guy was open, and Adrian Martinez missed him, or he didn't. Let's say he didn't drop the dime in the bucket. Let's put it that way. And that, those are the kind of plays that kill you. When you get a couple of turnovers like that, like Ohio State did earlier. Of course, Chase Young might have had his best game of the year last year at Nebraska when the bright lights were shining. But Nebraska always has a good plan offensively, in my opinion. I thought they really were affected last year, and Jack McEwen and I talked about that. When Adrian Martinez got kind of banged up, he just didn't seem to be the same player. He wasn't, and that really hurts you in a game like that. Because I've always thought, like I said, Nebraska's had some pretty damn good plans offensively. So they've got to take advantage of some things that a youngish defense is going to give them on Saturday. And we all remember last year when they jumped into the I formation suddenly, that homage series until they turned it over. Ohio State didn't have any idea what to do with it. You remember that little series of
option
plays,
football, yeah.
The homage to the great days of the I option, and interestingly, that's where I'm curious, and most guys who cover Ohio State are curious, is to see how well Tommy Togiai and those middle guys in the middle of the defensive front play on Saturday, because now the focus is on them. They've got to rise. You got to figure Scott Frost and his group, they know who the new guys are out there. They know who to pick on, and possibly, as John Cooper used to say, scratch where they itch, And so I would expect Nebraska to have a pretty good offensive game plan. But the thing real quick, the thing that he's got going for him, Scott Frost did, he didn't have last year. I think he feels like Luke McCaffrey can also play. Mm-hmm. So if Adrian Martinez isn't necessarily getting it done, you can get Luke McCaffrey in there and maybe punch some other buttons.
You do have options at quarterback. Nebraska's going to need to be better, and you and I both know this, against the run in the Big Ten. Pass rush has been an issue. Tim, as we wrap here, and it's so good to talk to you. Next time you're in town, brother, we are going to hit Misty's. I know we talked about that before we started chatting here, and get us a Nebraska steak. I'm interested in what what the feel is for Fields, and what I mean by that is he a guy that's so cool and calm he doesn't get into that realm of trying to do too much, because it looks like he does everything with ease. How's his headspace going to be with this drive? I mean, this bitter taste they have of either falling short or getting hosed against Clemson last year. I mean, is he going to be able to stay within himself and just be great?
Yeah, they had both of those feelings leaving that field, and the adults in the room, which were the referees, kind of messed them over a couple of times. But the bottom line is they still had a chance to win that game.
Yep.
And Chris Olave zigged when he should have zagged on that last pass, and because they had him matched up against probably Clemson's fourth or fifth best defensive back. Does that stick in their craw? Absolutely. But Justin Fields, if you watched last year, which we did, he got better seemingly on every possession and grew into that. It was his first year as a starter in college, his second year in college. He had started at Georgia. He started his career at Georgia, as you well know. But in Georgia, it looks like they could use him now. But I digress. Bottom line is, I think the only thing he needs to guard about is, he fought tooth and nail to have this season, as you well know. Started that petition. They got all those ridiculous number of signatures, online, et cetera, on Twitter. He and Trevor Lawrence kind of teamed up in that regard to say, we want to play. But the bottom line, I think what he has to watch for is maybe being a little overeager, because now, Christmas has come, He asked for this gift, and now he's got it. You don't want to be like my dad when I got a Cox powered airplane when I was like 8 years old, and my dad took it out to flight for the first time. This was for remote controls, and he went around twice, got dizzy, and tried to flip it around his head, and that plane crashed right into the parking lot and never flew again. You don't want to be that. You don't want to be too eager, and plus he's got weapons around him. Trey Sermon, the transfer running back from Oklahoma. Master Teague III, like we talked about, just the running backs, and then those receivers. What they want him to do is run the offense, stay efficient, and if the big play's there, take it. And of course, everybody knows that he's healthy now, and when he's healthy, he has a sub 4.4 second 40, so he's always a lethal threat to run it.
There you go. There's your rundown on the Buckeyes. Good luck and God bless for Nebraska. Tim May with us, LettermanRow.com, the podcast, and, of course, his work covering Ohio State. Tim, we'll talk soon, and thanks for your time today.
You got it, Chris. I'm looking forward to that steak from Misty's, my man. I'm telling you that right now.
The Hail Varsity Radio Saturday Morning Show, presented by the Nebraska Lottery. Strap yourselves in. Here are your hosts, Chris Schmidt.
Y'all don't even know he was a virgin until he's 28, and now, roll tide.
And Mark Cranack.
Time has come for someone to put his foot down. And that foot is me.
Welcome to it. Great to have you back. It's Hour 2. It's Hail Varsity Radio, presented by the Nebraska Lottery, weekend edition, pre-Nebraska, Ohio State. Sit down. We're down here in the Railyard. We invite you down. Going to be just an amazing day. Your chance to watch Nebraska, Ohio State. The Cube will be rocking, and it'll be socially distant and safe, of course. And we invite you down. Chris Schmidt, Mark Cranack, Elijah Herbal. Big thanks to Tim May in Hour 1, our Buckeye insider. An extended sit-down and just some thoughts. Tim May's in Columbus now, and I think he's dreaming of a big old steak from Nebraska. Also in Columbus right now, and I will find out what his pregame meal was. We welcome in managing editor with HailVarsity.com and magazine on the way to cover Nebraska and Ohio State on site. Brandon Vogel with his hat, Brandon L. Vogel.
And he's one of only like 8 media members.
Right. I mean, he's part of that crew. We say hi to Vogues. Vogues, how was your Friday night in Columbus, bud? Thanks for your time.
Yeah, thank you. It was pretty quiet. Got some food delivered to the hotel and got stuff ready for today while watching Wisconsin kind of easily dispatch Illinois.
That was a baby seal clubbing last night, man. I mean, you had the scoop and score for Illinois. I love Lovey's athletes he has on defense, but the Mertz show was very real. I mean, there'll be a lot of overreaction to it, but he looked darn good last night for a redshirt freshman. Wisconsin really put the hammer down after that thing almost got within 20 points.
Yeah, when Illinois came out and turned it over on their first drive, I was like, that might do it for this one. And you had a glimmer of hope there when Illinois' defense scored, but the offense couldn't do much of anything, which, might be important for Nebraska today. You think back to that 2018 game, and having some things go well from the start, I think, is really important for Nebraska to have a chance here. They went down and scored on their opening drive, had the unforgettable onside kick flub, but then got a stop in their own territory. And so that's 2 drives you basically won there, and getting that momentum rolling against a team like this is pretty much vital when you're in the spot Nebraska's in.
Speaking of momentum, last year, and we were talking about this in the first hour, let's go for some wild speculation here, Brandon. Nebraska goes I formation last year for that series, and things were pretty good until that ridiculous interception where the guy's laying on his back and it just kind of lands on his. Yeah,
that would be the 3rd pick overall, Jeff Okudah.
Right. So, look, I mean, it was the momentum that brought to Nebraska, though, and how crisp it looked, made me think, is that really just a one-series wrinkle? Because it looks like Nebraska works on this with some regularity. But then maybe after the Okudah interception, they're just like, you know what, forget it. We're not going to nope. And now they've had 10 months. I'm not saying they're going back to Tommy Frazier triple option stuff here. But do you think more of the physical downhill style is going to find its way into the Scott Frost offense as he evolves it from the time that he was at Oregon and UCF? Now Nebraska, the personnel's different. What do you think about that ridiculous speculation?
I mean, I think we could find out pretty quick today. And now it's a little bit strange because literally the only team they showed that against last year was Ohio State. But you look at this year's Ohio State team, and there's no weak points. There's only maybe that part's a little bit flexible, and I think Nebraska's ability to run between the tackles could be one of those places where you test. It's one of the greener areas for Ohio State, and also with this kind of reworked offensive line, now you've got a senior captain in there at right guard. Who might be going up against some relatively younger players for Ohio State in the middle of that defensive line, and then so I think you could see more of that. And I talked about this on the podcast this week. In the passing game, I think the teams that have had success against Ohio State in the past have tested the linebackers in coverage. So I think this could be a big game for Nebraska's tight ends as well, which is the part of the receiving game that I think at this point I feel the most confident about when you look at the receiver core and who may or may not be here for Nebraska today.
The elusive tight end.
That's right. Yep. Give me a little Johnny Mitchell love. Brandon Vogel's with us, HailVarsity.com and magazine. The I-80 podcast is a must-subscribe to and listen to. Vogues had an awesome podcast kind of kickoff. You had the soft opening 2 weeks ago, Vogues, and then you had your Ohio State-Nebraska preview. So let's talk offensive rhythm. If Nebraska is going to hang in this thing and compete, it's going to be, I think we all think, on the shoulders of the Nebraska offense. So let's talk about that rhythm from a play call standpoint, from a scheme standpoint. You got to get Adrian settled in, and the run game's got to be very key. I'm wondering, do we see, to your point about option football, Kranak, do we see more of a running Adrian today? Because that really was effective 2 years ago against the Ohio State defense. Adrian was good with his legs and his arm. It got him into rhythm. It seemed to get him into rhythm last year when he had some of his better games. Adrian on the ground, how focal is that this morning?
It'll depend a little bit. It'll depend, I think, some on how Ohio State chooses to defend Nebraska, I would be a little bit surprised if they kind of, at least out of the gates here, don't come out geared up for the run itself, be a quarterback or handoff run game. At least that's when you look at some of just the uncertainty for Nebraska at wide receiver, that's probably what I would expect to see. That 2018 game, Nebraska did get that early momentum going. They were pretty pass heavy on first downs. When I look back at that game this week, which was a little bit interesting, they just felt a little bit, I think, freer at that moment in that 2018 season to do so. You had, Spielman and Stanley Morgan had a good game that game. Do they feel that good about the receivers right now? I just don't know. And you look at the offensive line and the running back core, probably if Nebraska has its choice, it's going to get things done on the ground. And that's going to be really important. Can they stay on schedule that way? You start to do that, and then you open up some more of those design quarterback runs or even read options and things of that nature. So I don't know if we'll see a heavy dose of Adrian early, though. If we do, and he kind of looks like, Adrian looked good running the ball at times last year too. So it certainly makes sense to try and use one of your best weapons.
Brandon Vogel with us on Hail Varsity Radio. Anytime you're looking at, it's a 26-point underdog. That's what Nebraska is. So you're grasping at straws no matter what kind of matchup you look at, position group wise. But let's look at one and just handicap it for me a little bit. Ohio State's receiving core against Nebraska's secondary. How do you see that one?
Ohio State's receiving core is still a pretty heavy favorite, I think, just man for man, talent to talent. But I'm pretty high on Nebraska's secondary. I think, it's one of the better matchups you'd probably find position group versus position group in this game for Nebraska. So I'm interested to see what they can do there. I'll be interested to see. Ohio State could be a little bit run heavier than normal as well. That wouldn't totally surprise me. Trey Sermon, Oklahoma transfers. People are pretty high on him. He was really good 2 years ago, and then dealt with some injury stuff last year. So I think the safeties down in the box and their ability to tackle. I'll be really interested to see Deontay Williams, just because personally I'm happy for the guy to finally be able to play football again. But he's one of Nebraska's best hitters, most active guys, and I think he's someone who has to play pretty well today for Nebraska to be at its optimal level, I think.
Vogues, a thought with, what is the game plan from Coach Chinander, aside from get, maybe an extra 7 or 8 guys up front on the line of scrimmage? I kid. But, Ohio State, if they're smart, they're going to really lean on this 5-star, 5-man offensive front to run the football. And it's up for Nebraska to stop the run. But from an off-balance standpoint, what sticks out about, one of the better games Nebraska's defense has played was at Ohio State 2 years ago. And I keep going back to that because that was a moment where Nebraska had a shot, and the defense, while they got bloodied, they also connected a few times with some splash plays. Gifford was fantastic. JoJo had a really nice day as well. Lamar, the interception in the end zone. So Nebraska got some takeaways that Saturday in Columbus. How aggressive are you? How exotic are you trying to get pressure with just a phenomenal athlete and passer back there for Ohio State, or do you just load up against the run? I mean, what's the poison you deal with here Saturday, and what are you trying to do defensively if you're Nebraska?
Yeah, you got to be careful. Like, if you can get Ohio State into some passing downs, obviously that's step one. But I think you got to then be careful when you get those in terms of the aggressiveness, just because Dwayne Haskins was a good quarterback, kind of more of an in the pocket guy. Fields might be an even better passer and is perfectly happy to sit back there and pick you apart. But when he does go, he usually goes for pretty big runs. So you've got to be really wary of that when you get in those instances. But I think you're right. This needs to be a havoc-type game for Nebraska defensively. Came away with 3 takeaways, 2 fumble recoveries, and an interception, I believe, in that 18 game, but forced 4 fumbles. And that's what you need. You just need to kind of be out there, and obviously you're trying to force a fumble every play, but to be able to get them and just kind of having that mindset, I think, more than anything. Without the mindset, you're not even going to have a chance to kind of go after those balls and be a little bit ball hockey. You look at it, Ohio State scored 36 points, and Nebraska took 3 drives away from them. That's kind of what you have to do in this one.
Brandon Vogel with us on Hail Varsity Radio. And, kind of part of that, too, when you have an elusive quarterback that can also throw. I mean, Fields is it's
awesome.
He's a great quarterback, like literally a great quarterback. That's not a cliche. He's great. Do you take maybe the Virginia Tech 09
Eagle defense,
sort of mush rush? Because here's the thing: if you're screaming off the edge on this guy, which Nebraska hasn't been good at anyways, right? They have not been good off the edge, rushing the passer. If you're not good at that anyways, why would you do that against someone like Fields? Like, do you think we'll see some up the middle stuff, some pressure trying to be applied there, and you're just sort of mush rushing and just trying to keep Fields contained that way?
You could. It'll depend on, I guess, Nebraska's confidence and its ability to cover for long stretches then, and they might feel good about that. I mean, like we've already kind of talked about, I think all of us here feel the best about Nebraska's secondary of probably any level of the defense.
Which is funny, Brandon, not to cut you off, but I'm sorry, not to cut you off. The secondary, I totally agree, but they could absolutely get torched today, but I wouldn't necessarily see that as an indictment on them for the whole year. But sorry, I digress.
Yeah, no, I'm right there with you. So that would be a big part of it. This has to be the biggest. Ohio State's going to gain yards. They're probably going to gain a lot of yards. But if Nebraska can tackle well, that's another way you kind of stay in this one. It was a real struggle for Nebraska, for the defense as a whole. I think they can be a little bit better this year. Just with the safety play and inside linebacker play, I think they're able to bring up rushing off the edge. Like that outside linebacker spot's still a huge question. Nebraska needs to get some production from that spot one way or another. And I don't know if today will be the day for that, but it's got to come sooner or later this season.
Vogues, who's your offensive MVP today for Nebraska? Who's the defensive MVP today for Nebraska? Is that a next question?
No. I mean, it probably has to be Adrian Martinez, but I'll go with Dedrick Mills to just vary it up a little bit. And I'm really interested to see Ronald Tompkins, too. He was a guy that Ohio State kind of started sniffing around there, and when it became clear that he was rehabbing, as a high school player, and Nebraska, to its credit, had stuck with him the whole way, and he stuck with Nebraska. So, this could be not to put too many expectations on the guy, but when Frost said this week that he's basically a full go, then it's like, okay, well, let's see what this is all about. So, I think he could be a potential storyline coming out of this. I'd be surprised if he was the offensive MVP. Defensive, I'll go back to Deontay Williams, potentially. He's kind of my best bet on that side, though. Again, I think I'll be watching Colin Miller pretty closely, too. He obviously a captain, but just hearing him talk over the offseason and about this team then this week, really impressive. And I think I'm expecting pretty big things from him this year, too.
You're bringing up Tompkins. It kind of goes back to what we were talking about earlier about does Nebraska start to maybe evolve, not fully commit to, but start to evolve that offense into more of a downhill style. The fact that Tompkins has passed Ramir, those are 2 very different style of runners. Now, we haven't seen Tompkins yet, but from his high school film, very much a slasher type.
Yep.
Similar to Mills, to be honest. A little smaller, maybe a little quicker. But that's another downhill back. So your top 2 backs, that's what you're rolling out with. You're not rolling out with a scat back type. That's not what you're prioritizing right now in Nebraska. Do you think that signals anything about how Frost is evolving this thing?
I mean, they've still got a pretty good complement of guys back there when you get beyond those two. But to kind of reference back to where we started here, remember that I formation last year, Mills was the quote unquote fullback, and that they got him on one of those fullback dives. And it's just such a quick hitting play, which we all remember from Nebraska of the 80s and 90s. Like you get going downhill. So if Nebraska wanted to, you could have a pretty big backfield if you choose to go with a 2-back set like that. And I'm forgetting which defensive coach it was at the moment, but one of Nebraska's defensive coaches mentioned that they'd seen some 2-back sets, throughout camp. So I think it's in there. And I think for this game in particular, as we talked about with relative question marks on the interior of that Ohio State defensive line, I'd be surprised if we didn't see some of that.
Vogues, what time do you head to the stadium? Or did you bring your sleeping bag and just spend the night there?
I'm only about a mile away, so I will be departing as soon as we get done with this spot. So we'll be live on site here in about 20 minutes.
Well, tweet a picture of you from the press box and give me a score today.
Do you want the score now? No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
I'm probably in the 42-24 range, and I think that could end up looking pretty good. Like if you can get to halftime and you're like, okay, this is a game. I mean, like we said, Ohio State's 26, 27-point favorite, so you kind of know what you're walking into. But you get into the third quarter, and that talent advantage probably shows up. But if Nebraska can be in it at halftime, I think at that point in a chaotic season with the added chaos of just season openers in general, you'll take that. You'll take your shot and see what happens.
Brandon Vogel, HailVarsity.com and magazine managing editor of the I-80 podcast. And he is in Columbus, Ohio, on site for Nebraska and Ohio State for Hail Varsity. Vogue, safe trip and travels, and thanks for your time today.
Thanks a lot, guys.
There he is, Brandon Vogel, with us. Quick timeout. We're down here in the Railyard in the Hail Varsity Hurrdat offices, getting you ready as the Nebraska-Ohio State game will be on the Cube down here in the Railyard. So you're invited to come out, watch Nebraska-Ohio State, and be a consumer. Be a safe consumer, socially distant, but check things out down here in the Railyard today for Nebraska football. It feels amazing. The football's finally back. I am smiling. Another year of talking Nebraska. That is big time. We'll check in with the Iron Horse, Gary Sharp on the way. And then Cousin Dino, Dean Schmidt, will give us the final word as he's the biggest Nebraska fan I know. And we'll get his take on what happens today in Columbus. Dino's a guy that knows a thing or two about point spreads, bless his heart. So we'll get a score prediction from him. This is Hail Varsity, presented by the Nebraska Lottery.
Early to rise with Hail Varsity Radio, the voice of Husker Nation. Here's Chris Schmidt and Mark Kranek.
Well, I just officially got taunted. I'm throwing a flag on Mark Kranek. We've got some amazing food from our friends at Muchachos down here. We're down in the Railyard, Hail Varsity Radio Weekend Edition in the Hail Varsity Hurrdat offices. Kranek, that is the mother of all breakfast burritos. What do you got rocking there?
Goodness. It's ridiculous.
It looks great. You got a little pork and egg and green sauce.
It's about 17 pounds of pulled pork mixed with about 80 eggs and a block of cheese wrapped into a tortilla with some tomatillo sauce. Did you leave any? There's more over there.
Okay.
You gotta brace yourself though.
That
These things have some weight.
Speaking of bracing oneself, what's the mood and the mindset? We welcome in the Iron Horse, Gary Sharp, to talk Nebraska, Ohio State. Sharpie, welcome to football, brother. Been a long time coming. How are you?
330 days. I think if I ate that burrito that Mark was describing, I'd be in a food coma before 11.
It's really good, Gary.
We'll get you some Jaeger to wake you up.
All right. Well, you hold that. I will be there with you guys next week. I really appreciate the invite this week. We've been 8 months together through a pandemic, and the season starts, and you guys go ghost on me.
Brother, the door's open for you. I know we should have reminded you.
There's only so many burritos, though.
I will save one
not
for
personal.
you. Yeah. So, how you feeling, man? How are you feeling today? And, what are your hopes for 2020, Sharpie? I mean, the hope was to get football. We have that. That's awesome. But now let's go a little bit more zoomed in, and that's the fact that Nebraska's got a great opportunity, but there's also the wariness out there that is real with arguably one of the best teams in college football, if not the best, one of the favorites along with Clemson to take the title down. So what do you anticipate today?
Well, like you guys have been describing, this is a great day. I mean, we're trying to battle a pandemic and everything that's going on in our life, and we get this little respite where we didn't think we'd have football. And, people are excited. I jumped out of the lab early this morning, went out and about in the community, and, people are geared up, and you get the sense that, okay, now normalcy is returning. And then normalcy will hit you right in the face today when you realize you're playing one of the best teams in college football, a team that could win a national championship. But I think today is all about Nebraska. I know, get ready for the snarky comments if Nebraska falls behind, but this is about Nebraska. Ohio State is Ohio State, and they're going to try and do their thing. They're either going to try and throw a knockout punch first, or they're going to struggle. It's going to be choppy, and maybe Nebraska like 2 years ago was in a ball game. But this is about Nebraska, and I don't know. What people want to say is a successful season in their mind. A successful season in my mind, I'm not looking at a record, even though I think 4-4 and 5-3 is very obtainable if you think this program has made strides. But I think the look today and moving forward is key, that it looks like there's progress. It looks like this is a well-managed program from the CEO all the way down, that the recruiting is real, that players that are coming into the program that are highly ranked are actually really good, that you've got some guys that have developed. And then I think the biggest thing that I'll look forward this year that really you have to do to ignite the fan base for 2021 is, what does it look like on game day? Do guys have better football IQ? Do they have better feel for the game? Do they understand time and situation and score? And can they bring all of those things together? I think there's a lot of unknowns about this team, but I think I'm very optimistic about where this program is, because I think, as I've said numerous times to you guys, they've eliminated a lot of excuses off the field. We haven't heard about culture or buy-in. What we're hearing now is about football stuff, and that's how it should be in year 3.
Is part of the optimism the fact that when I try to think of like finesse players on this roster, and if you were to ask yourself that question like 3 years ago, you would probably be able to name a few. I can't name any. It doesn't mean that Nebraska is going to be great now. It doesn't mean that they're going to go undefeated. But in terms of just having a roster to where your only options that you can trot out there are guys that are okay with being physical. Doesn't mean they're great at it again. But right? Do you kind of see that same thing?
I do, and I think that's, you've been able to turn the corner in 2 years to kind of fleece the program, and I think players in the program nowadays, Mark, they understand what you want out of them, and the coaches understand what they have in the players, and I think they're all on the same, not all, but majority of them are on the same page, and they can move this forward where you can trust guys. I think that's the biggest thing I've learned with this staff, is that they have to trust you before they put you in key situations. And I think listening to coaches the last 2 weeks, there's a lot longer list of guys they actually trust in key situations than I think, even last year, and of course more than their first year.
Gary Sharp's with us, Hail Varsity Radio. Sharpie, when we get to that trust factor, when we get into game plan here and success offensively, what do you anticipate here? What type of game will Coach Frost call? What's the comfort level like on game day with Lubick? We know their history, so we know that the comfort's very real. But let's talk about how this all translates to calling a really good game for Adrian, and then in turn Adrian executing at quarterback to really drive this offense to make it a ball game. It's gonna be about Nebraska's offense, what they can do, and you need a little help from the defense. But how does that triumvirate work between Lubick, Frost, and Adrian today? What do you foresee?
Well, I think you have, for the first time in maybe a decade, you have some real optimism on the offensive line. You got some depth in the trenches, and Nebraska hasn't had that. So what do you also have? You have a running back that is running for a paycheck. Feed the beast today. Dedrick Mills all season long should carry the ball. I think Nebraska's identity is going to be running the football today. Run the ball, run the ball, run the ball. Keep Ohio State off the field. Control the clock. Stay on the field on third down. And also, let Adrian Martinez ease back into it. I think he's clean. He's cleared the mechanism upstairs. I think you'll see a different quarterback, but I don't think they're going to ask him to be Superman. I think they're going to ask him to just be a facilitator of the offense, drop it into the slot, let those guys catch and run. I don't know, not knowing who's going to play a lot today, that vertical threat is probably not still there. But first and foremost, this program needs an identity, and I think the identity starts today against a defensive line in Ohio State that, they might have a future NFL guy sitting there, but they're nowhere near where they were last year. I say run the ball, keep running the ball, and run the ball again until you're stopped. I'm Mr. Run the Ball guy today.
How many on the offensive line for Nebraska do you think ultimately end up playing in the NFL?
I will say that there will be 3 on the offensive line, maybe a 4th that plays in the NFL.
Okay. Now, how long has it been since we've been able to say that?
Is this the guys in the program or guys that, are maybe going to play?
Out of the 5 that are starting today, just how many of them do you think get snaps in the NFL eventually?
I think 3 plus possibly another one. And you're right. We haven't been able to say that in a long time. We also haven't been able to say that if you look to the backups, that there's guys there that if they progress could someday be in this discussion, one of them being Turner Corcoran, who I was elated to hear Greg Austin talk about the other night, that one of your highest-ranked recruits is going to be on the field. And a matter of fact, your only recruits at the offensive line in 2020, Corcoran and Kahn, both out of the state of Kansas, they both could play this year. I think that says a lot about Greg Austin. I think it says a lot about the development and the recruiting of that position.
Gary Sharp's with us, Hail Varsity Radio. Sharpie, let's flip it over to the defensive side of the ball and game plan for Nebraska against a guy like Fields. What do you want to do today? You're weary about the Ohio State run attack. Their offensive line's just incredible. But they also have athletes at wideout, Olave's money, and then you got Fields pulling the trigger, who's really, really talented. What's the plan for Chenander, and how do you go about slowing these guys down, if at all?
Well, first and foremost, I'll learn more about the offense for Nebraska today on how they're able to execute. Defense, I don't have a lot of hopes today because there's a lot of new guys in new positions, and they're getting educated right away. That's an offense that's going to stress you by the way they challenge you and they match you up. And then you got Justin Fields, who is a legit Heisman Trophy quarterback that is the best quarterback Nebraska will face all year. You got to get to him, but you got to get through an offensive line that has numerous NFL guys on it, with a defensive line that we still don't know a lot about because those guys are getting their first extended action. But last year, Fields was able to just sit back and pick apart Nebraska, and he hardly got touched. I don't know if he got touched the entire game by somebody that was wearing a red jersey. So you have to find a way to get to him. Whether you bring pressure, however you do it, you can't let him stand back there and just pick apart Nebraska. Because you like your defensive backfield, but they're going against some talented wide receivers, and they can't hold on forever. So I think Nebraska's going to need their stars on defense, if you consider them stars, to play really well today. And most of those guys are in the back end. But this isn't quite the challenge. I think keep an eye, though. Will Ohio State be able to run the ball as good as they did last year without J.K. Dobbins? Man, he was so dynamic in that offense, the things they could do with him in the running game and the passing game. Now they have Sermon, the transfer from Oklahoma, and then Teague, who got hurt in the spring, and if it was a regular season, probably would not have started the year. So let's see how they run. But Nebraska's got to get to Fields, and then they've got to tackle, and they've got to tackle in the open field. And then they got to get off the field on third down, and they got to force turnovers.
Gary, I go back and forth on how to even look at this season. I mean, with how many interruptions there were, with delays to the start of the season. Yeah. Potential more delays, changes to the schedule, all that, to where I'm just sort of like, this whole season, take it with a grain of salt. But the closer I get to it now, I'm sort of like, actually, maybe you should take this one even more seriously because it's sort of about your substance. You know, because there are going to be no games whatsoever. There's no warm-up games. There's no 1AA. There's no Sun Belt. There's no none of that. I mean, it is just flat out, can you ball against another Big Ten team? Everybody's been dealing with it. Who cares if there's been delays and all that? It's what are you made of? How do you kind of look at this season? Do you take it with a grain of salt, or do you think it's actually more of a realistic picture on exactly where the program is?
Well, I think it partially. I think it is from the standpoint of I've got those four things that I just mentioned that I'm judging programs on and coaches. How is the operation of your program from top to bottom? Well, we're seeing that. You're operating this during a pandemic, and guys haven't opted out, and you haven't had an outbreak. Now, you've had some cases, but you haven't had an outbreak. And then you go to recruiting, and then you go to development, and then you go to game day coaching. I think this year is a year that we learned a lot about Scott Frost. You have to have something happen during this year, a signature moment, where either you knock off Wisconsin and the Heisman Trophy winner Graham Mertz, or you go to Iowa City and win. I think you got to have a signature moment, because I think what this season does, guys, is I think there has to be something during the course of this season that ignites the fan base so that you can wrap your arms around something going into 21 that is tangible, that you can go, yes, they are building, there is momentum, I can see it, I can feel it, and 21 is going to be a monster year. You can't go through another year where you're really, really choppy and guys don't play good football, smart football, and you don't see guys making the next step. If that's the case, then we're all asking a lot of questions in the offseason. But that's what I'm looking for. And if that means a 4-4 season, a 5-3, you'll take it. I personally believe that there's going to be a three-way logjam at the top of the West at 5-3. Between Iowa, Wisconsin, Minnesota, and Nebraska with a bounce here or there and a good start where you go maybe 2-2 in your first four, Nebraska could be in that mix as well.
Sharpie, let's focus on the West real quick before we get you out of here. Gary Sharp's with us, Weekend Edition, Hail Varsity Radio. We're live in the Railyard ahead of Nebraska, Ohio State. So your take on Wisconsin last night and what early impressions on what you saw from them, and then let's fast forward over to Minnesota, Michigan. That'll be a monster game tonight. Give me a thought on tonight. Give me a reaction from last night.
Illinois' defense is bad. They're really bad. Graham Mertz was good, but he got no pressure whatsoever last night. I mean, that's scary that if you have Graham Mertz that was highly ranked coming out of Kansas City, and he looked as comfortable, and he threw the ball well, and he used something that I think Nebraska will use as a safety valve and as a main threat is a tight end position. Ferguson is a really good tight end, and if you're in trouble, to go find that big fella and get him the football, that's impressive. I mean, he was impressive last night, but let's not give him the Heisman yet. I think Trevor Lawrence might have a good day today against Syracuse. Wisconsin is Wisconsin. They do Wisconsin things. They got a game under their belt. There'll be a lot of intrigue next week. Illinois wasn't ready to play. They didn't look very good, and as a result, they got beat 45-7. The game tonight is there's so many narratives around this game about Harbaugh, but think of this. Jim Harbaugh now has Cam Newton as quarterback. Joe Milton's a big dude. He's 6'5", 250. He's also the first quarterback that Harbaugh has recruited on his own that is starting at Michigan. That's crazy to think about. You've got all these other guys that have been transfers or belong to somebody else that, Harbaugh has had a quarterback. He's a quarterback whisperer. Their whole season will be dictated by Joe Milton. If they get good quarterback play, they're right there in the East. For Minnesota, is last year a fluke? I don't think so. That's a very talented roster in Minnesota. They're going to be challenged tonight. I actually like Michigan in this game. I'm wondering about Minnesota. They have some guys they have to replace on defense, even with that talented offensive core. I think Michigan pulls an upset tonight.
I'm with you. I think Michigan's sick of hearing the doubt. I think your point about Milton's key. I mean, Harbaugh's supposed to be this guy that can do no wrong at quarterback, and I think he's really good with that. It's just not worked out for him as well at Michigan, and we'll see if Minnesota can kind of live up to these pats on the back. I know game day's there, and they had a great season last year. Last thought with Penn State, Indiana. Are we reading too much into the danger level, or is it real for Franklin and company in Bloomington?
I like Indiana. I know they're getting 6.5. This has the feel to me of Penn State scoring a late touchdown to win by 7. I don't know if Penn State is elite. They lost their two best defensive guys. Journey Brown is not going to be a running back. They got a brand new offensive coordinator with a quarterback. How much did that have an effect on opening day? Indiana has got a lot of talent returning, 9 starters on defense. They've got a plethora of skill guys on offense. I like where Tom Allen's got this program going. They always play Penn State tough, or at least the last couple of years they have. I think Indiana is right in this game tonight with Penn State. Maybe they get Penn State looking ahead, but, boy, they shouldn't look ahead. If they're looking ahead, they'll see that they're 2-touchdown underdogs to Ohio State, which just tells you guys, and you're going to see it on the field today, whether it be recruiting or just where a program is, the talent gap in the Big Ten is so wide, in my opinion, right now between Ohio State and Penn State, and then everybody else get in line behind that. But I think that's a good game today. I think Penn State is on upset alert.
Gary Sharp, the Iron Horse. Sharpie, welcome back football. Awesome breakdown this morning. Thanks for a few minutes today.
Oh, as always, guys, it's now normal that we've talked about football and we're not talking about a pandemic. So thanks for helping us get through all of the 8 months leading up to it, and I hope everybody enjoys it. And remember, it's just an opportunity. But we say that, and we say, oh, man, we're glad that it's back. You know what's going to happen? The first time Nebraska goes 3 and out or there's a pick or something, it'll be back to normal around here. People will be complaining and stuff. That's how it's
right.
supposed to be.
Yeah, right. You're good and happy and smiling until something bad goes wrong, and then we're back to what the hell. We'll shift right back there. Sharpie, be good. We'll see you soon, bud.
Thanks, man.
Hey, talk to you next week, guys.
All right. Gary Sharp, the Iron Horse, Hail Varsity Radio. Quick timeout. We'll wind down the weekend edition. We will head out to Cousin Dino's. And Dean Schmidt, giant Nebraska fan, he has toured and traveled all over through his years on site for some of the biggest and best Nebraska games with the Dino RV. He is at home, and we are going to get his prediction before we step away. This is Hail Varsity presented by the Nebraska Lottery.
Glad to have you back.
Yes, sir. You heard me right.
Here are the guys, Schmidt and Kranak.
Well, Hector, here's the game plan. You're going to bring us 2 absolute martinis. You know how I like them, straight up. And then precisely 7.5 minutes after that, you're going to bring us 2 more. Then 2 more after that every 5 minutes until one of us passes out.
Excellent strategy, sir.
Back with you, Hail Varsity Weekend presented by the Nebraska Lottery. Chris Schmidt, Mark Kranak, Elijah Herbal. We head out to the den of the biggest Husker fan I know. We welcome in Cousin Dino, Dean Schmidt. Dino, what's up? It's game day. Are you geared up? Are you excited? How are you?
Man, good morning. Yes, geared up, and the excitement is building. I guess this year has, for me at least, has been different than last year. We were a lot of fans over the top with enthusiasm, and this year, because of the hype, and this year it's kind of settled back to let's go see what the boys got. You know, no spring game and no film to speak of to see ahead of the season. So just trying to adjust to the change in years, and I'm hopeful that today they have to adjust to us. You know, Scott, I think, mentioned that when we first joined or when he first came on board, and I'm excited. I'm excited to see it. Get it started. Get the season started.
What's on the spread today for food, Dino?
Spread for food today? Probably something that goes with a diabetic type lunch. You know, cream of water soup, probably.
There you go. So you've been to a lot of ball games over the years. The Dino RV is infamous around Husker Nation. I need a score prediction from you, Dino. We're going to do this every Saturday morning at 8:50 Husker time, and we're going to get the final word from Cousin Dino with the score prediction. I know it's something you've had an interest in over the years with the spread and how things shake out.
Yeah, well, I guess we've got to wait for the national anthem to play, Chris, and see what's the seconds left on the clock.
Well, yeah, that would work.
I'll try to be a little bit more educated here. I believe that the Huskers are going to hang the first half. I think they're going to hang with them. I'm even thinking if we get the ball, we may score early and score first. But I think at the end of the day, they're going to win by as much as 21 points, or 17 points, I'm sorry. Score will be 21-38.
38-21, it's Ohio State, but Nebraska has a good showing. That is Cousin Dino, Dean Schmidt, the biggest Nebraska fan there is, and his words of wisdom. Dino, are you good to chat next week for Wisconsin?
Yes, absolutely. I want to get those guys really bad.
you and about 1.9 million.
I hope I can help.
I gotcha. Dino, love you much, brother. Keep fighting and be healthy, and we'll talk soon. Have a good day.
Go Big Red.
There he is. Cousin Dino beating Schmidt. He says 38-21, but Kranek, that's a cover.
It totally would be by a long shot. By the way, Wisconsin, I think maybe can be got. Underwhelming at the skill positions outside of quarterback.
Let's see how it works. Real Red Reaction immediately following Nebraska, Ohio State on ESPN Lincoln, ESPNLincoln.com, and other streaming platforms. So lock in. I'll be hosting that as soon as Nebraska, Ohio State ends. Thoughts from Scott Frost. Thoughts from you. Kranek, appreciate you, brother. Awesome to get this kicked off. Thanks to Elijah Herbal, Gary Sharp, and, of course, Brandon Vogel and Tim May. Talk to you later with Real Red Reaction and Hail Varsity.